The kitchen faucet had been dripping for 3 weeks, each drop a small reminder of another thing I couldn't afford to fix properly. After 12 hours on the factory floor, my hands were still steady enough to work the wrench, even if my back protested every movement. The house was quiet except for the soft murmur of the television in the living room where Marissa was watching her evening shows. Emma's voice carried down the hallway. "Dad, can you help me with this algebra problem?" I wiped my hands on the dish towel, leaving grease stains that would probably never come out. "Be right there, sweetheart," I called back. At 14, Emma had inherited her mother's quick mind and my stubborn determination. She sat cross-legged on her bed, textbooks spread before her, pencil marks covering the margins where she'd worked through failed attempts. "I keep getting the wrong answer," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. I settled beside her, my work boots still on, too tired to care about the bedspread. "Show me what you've got so far," I said gently. We worked through the problem together, my patient explanations filling the small bedroom. This was the part of my day I treasured most, when my exhaustion didn't matter, when the bills waiting on the kitchen counter faded into background noise, when I could still be the father who had answers. "Got it." Emma's face lit up. "Thanks, Dad." "Always," I said, kissing the top of her head. "Don't stay up too late." The shower was running when I returned to the kitchen, steam beginning to fog the bathroom door. Marissa's phone sat on the counter where she'd left it, screen dark and silent. 20 years of marriage had been built on trust. I'd never been the type to check her messages. The phone buzzed. I glanced toward the bathroom, then back at the screen. The message preview was visible. "Mike C. Can't wait to see you tonight. He'll be too tired to notice again." My hands moved without conscious thought, picking up the phone. The message was real. The red heart emoji burned into my retinas like a brand. I read it again, then a third time, my mind struggling to process the casual intimacy, the calculated cruelty of that final sentence. He'll be too tired to notice again. The kitchen around me suddenly felt foreign. The refrigerator hummed too loudly. The dripping faucet I'd just fixed seemed to mock me with its steady rhythm. 20 years of marriage, of working double shifts to pay for Emma's braces and Tyler's football equipment, of believing that my dedication meant something. I set the phone down exactly where I'd found it, movements careful and deliberate. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. That would come later, in the privacy of my garage, when the full weight of discovery finally settled into my bones. The shower was still running. Marissa was probably conditioning her hair, taking her time like she always did. I walked to the living room and sat heavily in my recliner, staring at the television without seeing it. My mind was already working, already calculating, already beginning to plan. I'd spent my entire adult life being the man who fixed things, who provided, who protected. Now I was going to learn how to be the man who dismantled everything I'd built, piece by careful piece. The water stopped running. I heard the shower door open, heard Marissa's footsteps on the bathroom tile. In a few minutes, she would emerge, fresh and clean and ready for her evening out. She would kiss my forehead and tell me she was meeting her book club, the same lie she'd been telling for months. But tonight, for the first time, I would know exactly what those words really meant. I woke at 5:30 a.m. as always, but instead of immediately heading to the shower, I lay still and watched my wife sleep. Marissa's face was peaceful, unmarked by guilt or shame. Her wedding ring caught the early morning light, the same ring I'd saved months to buy, working overtime to afford something worthy of the woman I thought I was marrying. At breakfast, Tyler barely looked up from his cereal. At 16, our son had developed the selective awareness common to teenagers, but I found myself studying his face, searching for signs of knowledge I'd previously missed. Tyler mentioned casually, not meeting my eyes, "Mom's got book club again tonight." My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. "She's been going to a lot of meetings lately," I observed. "Yeah, well, They're reading some long book, Tyler said, his voice carefully neutral. Emma looked up from her toast. What book? She asked curiously. Tyler shrugged. Some romance thing. You know how Mom gets. The conversation continued around me, but I was no longer listening. I was cataloging. The way Tyler's shoulders tensed when he mentioned the book club, the way Emma's eyes flicked between her brother and me, the way Marissa hummed softly while packing her lunch. At work, I found myself unable to concentrate on the assembly line. My hands moved through familiar motions, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying conversations and moments I'd previously dismissed. Marissa's new gym membership 3 months ago, the expensive lingerie I'd found in the laundry, tags still attached, that she'd claimed was on sale, her sudden interest in wearing makeup to the grocery store. During lunch break, I sat in my truck and opened my phone. I'd never been good with technology, but desperation was a powerful teacher. I started with the basics. Mike C. A quick search revealed several possibilities, but only one made sense. Mike Chambers, owner of Chambers Development Group. The company website showed a man in his early 50s, silver-haired and confident, standing in front of a shopping center I recognized. The bio mentioned 3 commercial properties, a Mercedes dealership, and a home in Hillcrest Estates, the gated community where houses started at $500,000. I stared at the photo for a long time, memorizing the face of the man who could give my wife everything I couldn't. Mike Chambers looked like success, like someone who'd never had to choose between fixing a faucet and buying groceries. That evening, I volunteered to do dishes while Marissa got ready for her book club. I watched through the kitchen window as she headed north toward Hillcrest Estates, not east toward the library where the book club supposedly met. The house felt different with her gone. I moved through rooms I'd lived in for 15 years, seeing them with new eyes. The family photos on the mantel suddenly seemed like lies, their smiling faces a carefully constructed fiction. I was sitting in my recliner pretending to watch the news when Tyler and Emma settled onto the couch. They spoke in low voices, the kind of careful conversation that stopped when parents entered the room. Emma whispered, "Do you think Dad knows?" I kept my eyes on the television, expression unchanged. Tyler's voice was equally quiet. "Knows what?" "About Mom and that guy. I saw his car in our driveway last Tuesday when I came home from school," Emma revealed. "You didn't tell anyone, did you?" Tyler asked urgently. "No, but Tyler, Dad works so hard, it's not fair," Emma said with concern. Tyler was quiet for a moment. "It's not our business, Em. Mom said she'd handle it." "But what if she doesn't? What if she just keeps lying?" Emma pressed. "Then that's between them," Tyler replied. "Dad's a grown man. He can take care of himself." My hands tightened on the armrests, but I didn't move, didn't speak. My own children had been living with this secret, carrying the weight of adult decisions they shouldn't have had to make. They'd been protecting me, treating me like someone too fragile to handle the truth. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the pity. My own family had decided I was too weak, too pathetic to deserve honesty. When Marissa came home at 11:30, she kissed my forehead and told me about the book they were reading, a mystery novel about a detective who discovers his partner's corruption. "How was your evening?" she asked, settling into bed. "Quiet," I said. "Just spent time with the kids." She smiled and turned off the light. Within minutes, she was asleep. I lay in the darkness, listening to her breathing, and began to plan. The law office of Chen and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a modest downtown building. Sarah Chen was younger than I'd expected, probably in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake that suggested she'd fought for everything she'd achieved. "Tell me about your situation, Mr. Reynolds," she said, settling behind her desk. I'd rehearsed this conversation dozens of times, but speaking the words aloud felt like swallowing broken glass. I kept my voice steady as I laid out the evidence. The text messages I'd photographed, the timeline of Marissa's absences, The financial records showing mysterious expenses. Sarah took notes without judgment, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she set down her pen and leaned back. "How long have you been married?" she asked. 20 years. Next month would have been our anniversary, I replied. Children? 2. Tyler's 16, Emma's 14. She nodded. Oklahoma is a no-fault divorce state, which means adultery won't affect property division or custody. However, it can impact alimony decisions, especially if marital funds were used to support the affair. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "More evidence, photos, financial records, witness statements if possible. The more documentation you have, the stronger your position." She paused. "I have to ask, are you certain you want to proceed?" I thought about my children's whispered conversations, about Mike Chambers' Mercedes and gated community home, about 20 years of loyalty rewarded with casual cruelty. "I'm certain," I said firmly. The financial maneuvering began immediately. I opened a new checking account at a different bank, slowly transferring funds from our joint savings, money I'd earned through overtime and weekend shifts. I cashed out my 401k, accepting the penalties because I needed liquidity more than retirement security. Each transaction was documented, each decision carefully planned. I'd spent my adult life following rules, trusting systems, believing that hard work and honesty were enough. Now I was learning to think like my opponents, calculating, strategic, ruthless when necessary. The surveillance equipment was easier to obtain than I'd expected. Small cameras disguised as everyday objects, voice recorders that could be hidden in plain sight. I installed them methodically, turning my own home into an evidence-gathering operation. The moral complexity wasn't lost on me. I was violating privacy, betraying trust, but the irony was bitter. My wife had already betrayed everything sacred about our marriage. The recordings revealed more than I'd expected. Marissa's phone conversations with Mike were intimate, casual, filled with references to their future together. She talked about the house they'd buy, the trips they'd take, the life they'd build once the situation with James was resolved. "He's so exhausted all the time," she said during one recorded call. "He comes home from work and just sits in that chair like an old man. I can't remember the last time we had a real conversation." Mike's voice was smooth, confident. "You deserve better than that. You deserve someone who can actually provide for you." I listened to these conversations alone in my garage, methodically cataloging each revelation. The woman I'd married had been systematically erasing our life together, preparing for a future that didn't include me. The final discovery came through Mike's own arrogance. I'd been monitoring social media when I found posts from a woman named Jessica, 28 years old, blonde, employed at one of Mike's properties. The photos were recent, intimate, clearly indicating a relationship that had been developing for months. Cross-referencing dates, I realized the timeline. Mike had been seeing Jessica while maintaining his affair with Marissa. The wealthy developer was playing both women, keeping his options open while they competed for his attention. Marissa had no idea. She was planning a future with a man who was already planning to discard her. She was about to learn the same lesson I had learned, that loyalty and love meant nothing to people who viewed relationships as transactions. I sat in my truck outside Mike's office building, watching him walk to his Mercedes. Mike Chambers looked exactly like what he was, successful, confident, untouchable. But I knew something he didn't. Everyone was touchable if you were patient enough to find their weakness. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday morning. I'd chosen the date carefully. Marissa had a book club meeting scheduled for that afternoon, which meant she'd be emotionally vulnerable when she discovered her marriage was over. Tuesday morning arrived with crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. I woke at my usual time, but instead of heading directly to the shower, I sat on the edge of the bed and watched my wife sleep. In a few hours, Marissa's life would be permanently altered, and she had no idea. The divorce papers were in my truck, sealed in a manila envelope along with copies of photographs, financial records, and witness statements. Sarah Chen had been thorough. The documentation was comprehensive, devastating, and legally bulletproof. At breakfast, Marissa hummed while making coffee, her mood bright with anticipation. She'd mentioned her book club meeting the night before, her voice carrying the excitement of a woman looking forward to seeing her lover. "I might be a little late tonight," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We're discussing the ending of our book, and you know how those discussions can run long." "What book are you reading?" I asked, testing her. "Oh, it's a mystery, something about betrayal and consequences." She smiled. "Quite gripping, actually." The irony was so perfect I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded and finished my coffee. I waited until she was in the shower before retrieving the envelope from my truck. I placed it on the kitchen counter, directly in front of the coffee maker where she would inevitably see it. The manila envelope looked innocuous enough, but its contents would detonate her carefully constructed fiction. "I'm heading to work," I called toward the bathroom. "Have a good day," she called back. I drove to the factory, punched in at my usual time, and went through the motions of my shift. My supervisor commented on my unusual focus, not knowing I was simply trying to occupy my mind until the inevitable phone call came. It arrived at 2:47 p.m. Marissa's voice was small, shaken. "James, I need to talk to you." "I'm at work," I replied curtly. "I know, but this is important. I came home for lunch and found... James, we need to discuss this." "There's nothing to discuss. The papers are self-explanatory," I said calmly. "How long have you known?" she asked. The question hung in the air between us. I could hear her breathing, could picture her standing in our kitchen, holding the evidence of her betrayal. "Long enough," I said finally. "Where are you staying?" she asked. "That's my concern," I replied. "What about the kids?" "They'll have to choose for themselves. They're old enough to understand the situation." The silence stretched for nearly a minute. When Marissa spoke again, her voice was desperate. "We can work through this. People make mistakes. We can go to counseling. We can..." "No," I said, my voice calm, final. "We can't." I hung up and returned to my workstation. My hands were steady, my mind clear. The first phase was complete. The financial devastation was already in motion. I'd been systematically removing my contributions from our joint accounts for weeks, leaving behind only the minimum required to avoid triggering alerts. The mortgage payment was due in 5 days, a payment that had always come from my account, but which now would be Marissa's responsibility alone. The house they'd lived in for 15 years, the house where she'd entertained her lover while I worked double shifts, was now entirely her burden. On a part-time teacher's salary, she'd never be able to afford the payments. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom place across town that I'd rented the previous week. The furniture was minimal, but it was mine. Every stick of it had been purchased with my own money, without consultation or compromise. My phone rang constantly. Marissa, Tyler, Emma, even my mother-in-law. I answered none of them. The social destruction was already beginning. I hadn't engaged in petty gossip. I'd simply allowed the truth to circulate through channels it naturally followed. Small towns had their own ecosystems of information. By Thursday, the story would be everywhere. Friday evening brought the final confrontation. Tyler and Emma appeared at my door, looking younger than their ages. Tyler said, "Dad, we need to talk." "About what?" I asked. "About what I did. About what I should have done different," he replied. I studied my son's face, seeing genuine remorse rather than defensive anger. "Come in," I said finally. Tyler entered hesitantly, looking around the house. "This is nice. Really nice." "It's home," I said. "Do you want something to drink?" "Water would be good," Tyler replied. We sat in the living room, the space quiet except for the tick of the wall clock. Tyler fidgeted with his water glass, clearly rehearsing what he wanted to say. "I got a job," he said finally, "at the auto parts store. It's not much, but it's helping Mom with bills." I nodded. "That's good. Work is good for you." "I've been thinking about what you said, about loyalty and choices." Tyler looked up from his glass. "You were right. I chose to protect Mom's lies instead of being honest with you." "Why?" I asked simply. "Because I was scared. Because I didn't want our family to break up. Because I thought if I just ignored it, maybe it would go away," he admitted. I recognized the logic, the same magical thinking that had kept me from confronting Marissa's deception for longer than I should have. "I know I can't take it back," Tyler continued, "but I want you to know that I understand now. I understand why you couldn't just forgive and forget. I understand why you had to leave." "Do you?" I asked. "Yeah. Because staying would have meant accepting that we all thought you were too weak to handle the truth. And you're not weak, Dad. You're the strongest person I know." The words hung in the air between us. I saw my son not as the teenager who'd betrayed my trust, but as a young man beginning to understand the complexity of adult relationships. "I've missed you," Tyler said quietly. "I've missed having a dad." "I haven't stopped being your dad," I replied. "But I can't be the same dad I was before. That person trusted too easily, forgave too quickly, and let other people make decisions about his life." "What kind of dad can you be?" Tyler asked. I considered the question. "An honest one. A dad who expects honesty in return. A dad who loves you enough to let you face the consequences of your choices, even when it's hard." Tyler nodded slowly. "I think I'd like that." We talked for another hour, carefully navigating the changed landscape of our relationship. When Tyler left, he hugged me for the first time in months. Not the casual embrace of obligation, but the genuine connection of two people choosing to rebuild something that had been broken. I stood on my porch and watched my son drive away. The reconciliation wasn't complete. Trust would be rebuilt slowly, through actions rather than words, but it was a beginning. The revenge was complete not because I'd destroyed my enemies, but because I'd refused to let their betrayal destroy me. 2 years after the divorce, I was refinishing the hardwood floors in my living room when the mail arrived. Among the bills was a letter from Tyler, postmarked from the state university where he'd started his freshman year. I set aside my sandpaper and opened the envelope. "Dad, I know it's been a while since we talked, but I wanted to tell you about something that happened last week. My roommate found out his girlfriend was cheating on him, and he asked me what he should do. I told him to talk to you. I know that sounds weird, but I've been thinking a lot about what you went through, and I realized that you handled an impossible situation with more dignity than anyone had a right to expect. You didn't scream or beg or try to hurt people just to hurt them. You just protected yourself and rebuilt your life. I'm learning that being a man isn't about being tough or strong or any of that stuff. It's about being honest, even when honesty costs you everything. It's about taking responsibility for your choices and letting other people take responsibility for theirs. I'm proud to be your son. I'm proud to tell people about the man who raised me, even if I didn't always appreciate what he was teaching me. I hope you'll come to my graduation. I know it's still 3.5 years away, but I want you there. Love, Tyler." I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer where I kept important documents. Outside, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across my yard, highlighting the garden I'd planted and the fence I'd built to define my property lines. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "James, this is Marissa. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize. I've been going to therapy, and I'm starting to understand how much I hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations belonged to the past, and some apologies came too late to matter. The phone rang as I was preparing dinner. Tyler's name appeared on the screen. "Dad, did you get my letter?" Tyler asked. "I did. It meant a lot," I replied. "I meant every word. And Dad, I want to ask you something." "What's that?" "Would you be my best man when I get married? I know I'm only 18 and I'm not even dating anyone seriously, but when the time comes, I want you standing next to me." I smiled, looking around my kitchen, my house, my life. I'd be honored. After we hung up, I returned to my floor refinishing project. The work was methodical, satisfying, the kind of improvement that revealed beauty hidden beneath years of wear and neglect. As I worked, I thought about the letter, about Tyler's growth, about the man my son was becoming. The revenge was complete, but it had never really been about Marissa or Mike or any of the people who'd betrayed me. It had been about refusing to let their choices define my worth, about building something authentic from the ruins of something false. Tomorrow, I'd apply the final coat of finish, and the project would be complete. Then I'd move on to the next improvement, the next challenge, the next opportunity to build something lasting and true. In the morning, I'd wake up in my own house, go to my own job, and make my own choices about how to spend my time and energy. The story was over, but the life it had created was just beginning. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.